Hey folks, this is going to be a little tutorial and a look at third intervals in different modes of A, which is a fun key to play on guitar because you can play with the open A string and the open top two strings that more or less fit various A scales. So we're going to be focusing on the middle strings, 3 and 4, to allow us to drone those surrounding strings. Let's take a look at we can look at the four most common modes. First, of course, major, even though it's not the most versatile or maybe not necessarily the most common even, depending on style of music. We have to kind of use it as it's kind of the framework of our whole musical system, and we can see what notes are going to change by how they compare to the major scale. Okay, so the lines are connecting the pairs here. So now notice that some of them have a feeling of resolution and some don't. Even though this first one here is note number 1, has note number 1 in it, this note here is a 6, which, as we know, our chord tones are going to be 1, 3, and 5. And those are the only ones that are labeled in this one to emphasize which are the chord tones. So the two stops, we're going to call these stops, that will fit with an A major chord will be this one and this one. Now notice those are two stops apart, so you can have fun changing between the two, including the one in between as a kind of a passing tone. And the stop up here, you might make an exception and not do thirds and play the fourth interval here that is comprised of the root with a low fifth. Okay, so that's A major. Let's look at mixolydian, which has as you may know, has a lowered seventh. So this is going to fit more of the bluesy stuff, also some of the good jam band music. So I've labeled the minor sevenths here. Also fits in with an A7 chord. So, because the A7 has that lowered seventh in it. So that's where it's maybe most useful. But if you had a progression that would say A and G, it's going to have that lowered seventh like the G is. Now notice above these we have some chord references. And flat 7, that would be referring to that G chord, the chord based on the flat 7. The minor 7 is the note, flat 7 is the chord. So a little different in terminology depending on the context, chord versus scale degree. Okay, so these are going to get confusing with now we're mixing modes, patterns shifting on you. You could look at the relative, whatever the parent major is, but I think it's not as useful as just working on being aware of what scale degrees are where they are. Starting with the chord tones and then filling in, and then using the modes, understanding of the modes to alter them. Let's continue on. So those are kind of the two most common major modes. Now we have a couple of minor modes here because they have the minor third. So the difference between this and the last one is this has the minor third. So Dorian is characterized or defined as having that major 6 in it, which is different from the next minor, the default minor. And that's going to fit in with a major 4 chord, and that's why you see 4 listed up here In this case, in this key, that would be D major. So if you had a song that was A minor to D, this one would fit in the D chord because that's sixth note. That fits in with a 4 chord. This one would also fit with a 4 chord, and this one. So you can look at those as B targets. You know, if this one is A minor, so you got a neighboring pair here of stops. So all right, continue on. Aeolian, that's the minor scale. That's kind of, I like to say it's the default minor. Because if you just say minor key, it usually refers to Aeolian. It's also called natural minor. And that has that minor 6 in it. Now that's going to be associated with a chord progression that has where the 4 chord is minor. So D minor in this case. And that's the giveaway to tell the difference of which to use. Look at the quality of the 4 chord. If it's major, you need to use Dorian. If the 4 chord's minor, you got to use Aeolian. So let's hear this one. Somber as minor goes. Now this, let's see, this could also be labeled, yeah, it's mentioned up here, the flat 6 chord. So if you had an F chord in this key, that would be the flat 6 chord. So any progression like Stairway to Heaven, the big end jam, or All Along the Watchtower if you were to play it in A minor. Using this scale and some of these stops, that would fit in with your F chord. Now remember, if you find one that fits a chord, there may be other chords in your progression that hopefully the chords fit in the same mode, otherwise you might have to switch rows here. But anyway, keep in mind that if you find a stop that fits the chord, there's another one 2 stops away. You might think in either direction if we're including 7th chords, because if you go up a third, you're really just extending the chord into 7ths and 9ths and stuff. So you can get away with that to some degree. Eventually, maybe resolve it by altering a note. So that's a good, excellent way to practice these. Is not to just play every one in a row, in series, but skipping, and then you'll hear that. So, for example, I'll play this stop and then this one. Back 1, skip ahead, step back, skip ahead. So you can get very creative. And if you hear any songs in any of these examples, I'd love to start associating these with song examples more. But I use these just in improvised, and it's a good way to kind of map out your scale too, and give you some flexibility going out of the box, so to speak. Because we tend to get stuck in these vertical boxes where you're just soloing in a scale position in a box, but you want to be able to go up and down the neck. So one way to do that is just kind of work your way up using a couple of strings, and then you can maybe find a new box and and play around with there. So that's something that I did a lot of when I was just studying all these scales in the different positions. Is try to might start in one of the more familiar boxes, but then work your way up and now uncharted territory, trying to find the box in there. So various applications of this, but third intervals are really just a good way to make nice, pretty harmonized harmonies, a harmonized scale. You could also play these with two guitarists. If you a lot of like metal bands like Iron Maiden or bands like the Allman Brothers that had two guitars that did harmonized leads. They might be using the same sort of map. All right, well, I hope that helps. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. And onward and upward.